want to talk about with the quarterbacks was Jimmy. I think this obviously will be one of the defining years of Jimmy's career. I think thus far he hasn't really been challenged in this sort of way ever, maybe in his life, let alone his career. So for you, I was kind of looking at this from the Vegas perspective. They love to put an over-under for games won, things like that sort of thing. So if you were setting the over-under for Jimmy's games played and you were a bookmaker, what would you put the number at for this year?
Yeah, I'll preface it by saying that I don't have the skills of those Las Vegas bookmakers. What they do is pure magic. But I will also say that, their goal is to simply create basically even bets on each side, right? They want to create a system. They make money on every bet that's placed. That's the magic of Vegas.
They want as much action as possible.
As much as possible. And if they can have it equal on both sides, great, because then they just make nothing but profit regardless of who wins. But I think it's going to be pretty high. I think going into it, you have the traditional old school football people who are going to be more of your bettors, right? That's more of your Vegas audience, is obviously people who are old enough to gamble. And so those are people who have been watching football for a little while. And therefore, those are people who typically have some old school beliefs. And I think most of those people say, well, the 49ers view themselves as a Super Bowl team. A rookie quarterback has never started for a Super Bowl winning team. Ergo, they're probably going to go with Jimmy. But Jimmy gets hurt often. So it's possible that Lance has to come in to fill in for the fact that Jimmy can't play. So there's got to be that middle ground that compensates for the idea that this is old school football. The veterans got the best chance of winning the job, but the veteran doesn't have a very good track record of staying healthy. I'm going to say that it's pretty high. I would say that it would be set at 12.5. You either have the ability, the belief in his ability, or you don't. I think it's much more about injury. And I think a 12.5 leaves you comfortable that he can miss a couple of games. But if you're under 12.5 in your belief of how many games Jimmy's going to start, then it's a real low number, right? At that point, you probably believe he's either starting week 1 or that Jimmy is going to get injured week 2 or week 3, right? And then you believe he's going to start a lot of games. So I think that they would need to compensate for those people who are a bit more realistic of, Jimmy's probably going to be the starter week 1, and he's probably going to miss some games to injury. So I'd put it right in there at the 12.5. I'm interested to know, if it were set there, are you taking the over or the under?
I would hammer the under. And I'll tell you why. It's because now that I'm talking with you out loud, the original thing I wrote down when I wrote this down was 6.5. And I'm not going to go quite there. I'm actually going to disagree with that because I think you made some great points with Jimmy. But you know where I will put it is 9.5 games. And I'll tell you exactly why that number is important. Because the trade deadline is about week 9 every single year in the NFL. So I think if we get into a scenario where Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance, there's a battle, there's a question how good Jimmy is. And hey, we know this team is great, but look, Jimmy's not even playing that well, and the team is already doing well enough. So what's going to be the difference with the rookie? That's where I think things become really interesting, right? So I think if you put it at the 9.5 game mark, I could see a lot of people betting the over and the under for that. I think that would be a great number. And Gavin right now is saying, hey, he would hammer the over. I think the biggest thing I have with this is the reason I'm not putting that number any higher specifically is because, like we've seen with Jimmy, it's the injury thing.
Yeah,
you have to bake that into your evaluation with him. I mean, even in New England, he only played 2 of the 4 games he was supposed to play because he got an AC joint injury. And that's the thing with Jimmy too. It's not, consistent knee injuries. It's not shoulder injury after shoulder injury. It's something every single time. And the only consistent thing with Jimmy is that he is hurt and he does miss time. So when I do consider all of that, I feel like 9.5 is a spot where you could get a lot of action on either side of that number.
Yeah. I love the logic that you use there with the trade deadline. I think that is really insightful to pull that in because there are so many scenarios that you could see us shipping off Jimmy. If we got a good offer, almost regardless of what's going on, unless it's clear that we're headed towards a potential Super Bowl berth, I think if you get a good offer, you're probably moving on from him because we need draft capital back in order to be competitive for years to come with no first rounders. And I think that there are plenty of scenarios where in practice, you see both of them playing at close levels or Trey starts to edge him out. And now you're interested in moving on from Jimmy, even if it's not a great offer, because if you're going to go to Trey, much better to ship Jimmy out first than to move to Trey first. And then people know that, well, now Jimmy's a backup. Like, I'm not going to give you good compensation for a backup. So I like that call.